Okay, well, a very warm welcome back to the fourth session of today's conference. It's a real pleasure to welcome a distinguished panel for you to discuss careers in economics. We've got three new panelists who haven't appeared so far today. So first of all, very excited to have Professor Lorenzo Trapani from Nottingham University. He's a professor in the School of Economics there. His specialist area of research is econometric theory and statistics, but he also has experience as an undergraduate course director in his previous role at Cass Business School. And we're going to talk just a bit about how universities run courses and that sort of side of things. We also invited two former students from Dulwich, from my school. We've got Dan Steele, who graduated from Bristol University reading economics in 2019, who's now working as a corporate audit associate at Buzzercott. And we have Adam Bees, who's a current student. Adam's in his third year of 4 studying accounting at Newcastle University. On the Flying Start programme, which is a joint course run by the university and PwC, the firm. Finally, it's a real pleasure to welcome back our morning speakers, Helen Thomas, CEO of financial consultancy firm Blonde Money, and also Lau Chattersing, Senior Advisor at the Behavioural Insights team, working in their education team. A very warm welcome to you all. Just as a reminder, and I'll post this on the chat for everyone, we're still using slido.com for polls. I've just loaded one up at the moment, which is going to ask all the attendees, which of the following options best describes what you'd like to do after school. We're also going to have a ranking where you can rank different topics for me to ask. And please do submit any questions through the Q&A on Zoom, and I'll try to manage the conversation so we answer the questions you're interested in. Okay, so first question, I think we'll go sort of, just to introduce everyone, could I ask people to give me a quick elevator pitch sort of summary? What was your journey from, let's say, the age of about 16, 17 to where you are now? And why don't we start with Helen, first of all?
Great. Well, when I was 16, I wanted to be Prime Minister, so not exactly going as I had initially planned. My goal, though, was to do something that I enjoyed and that would open doors to the direction I wanted to go in. I knew I wanted to be kind of in the thick of the world of politics and economics. So I did PPE at Oxford, did prior to that maths, French, history, English as A-levels. So I didn't even do economics A-levels. You're all a step ahead of me there, those of you doing it. And then worked in the city for 20 years, worked for a number of banks, worked for a number of fund managers, dipped my toe into politics, working with George Osborne and then Policy Exchange in 2008-9, but realized that though I love politics, I do not love it as a job. And in the end, I basically pulled together my own business to create a job that looks at the political economy. But I guess my focus is, work hard, build your network, and keep going.
Brilliant, thanks very much. And same question to Lorenzo.
Thank you very much. And let me start by saying thank you very much for inviting me. Lovely opportunity, and I'm honored to be here. So yes, when I was 16, 17, I was in Italy and I was studying at secondary school, like a lot of you, and secondary school finishes when you're 19. My dream was to study some liberal arts subject like Latin literature, preferably, or Italian literature, but obviously that was a guarantee for unemployment. So I went on to study engineering, which on the contrary in Italy is regarded as the top profession. I studied it at the Polytechnic University of Milan, because in Italy, Polytechnic universities are regarded as the top ones. It's a very different world to what we're used to. I fell in love serendipitously with statistics, so there's nothing to do with economics, and I decided that's what I wanted to do. And then in 2002, after I had started my PhD, still in industrial engineering, I came to the UK and I started learning what econometrics is, which is the crossroad between statistics and economics. I had a career in the Faculty of Finance, starting from PhD student all the way up to chair. And in 2017, I moved to Nottingham, where I still am now. And well, that's all, folks.
Brilliant, thank you, Lorenzo. And then same question to you, Lau.
Thanks. So yeah, 16, 17, I was studying economics, A-levels, my favorite subject. Definitely wanted to do it at uni. Applied, didn't quite get in where I wanted the first time. So I had a year out, applied again, eventually went to Durham, studied economics for my undergrad. While there, I did an internship with the Government Economics Service. So I was always quite focused on wanting to really use economics in my career. I then did a master's in economics and public policy at the University of Bristol. and then went back this time as a graduate to the Government Economics Service. Worked there for a little bit, wasn't 100% for me. So I then left and became an economics and politics teacher for a little bit. And then I again left and joined the Behavioral Insights team to work on education-related projects using both my behavioral economics and my teaching experience. So I think it now looks, I've now been at Behavioral Insights team for 5 years. It looks like it was a very solid, coherent plan, but it wasn't always like that along the way. So yeah, that's me.
Brilliant, thanks very much, Lau. Same to you, Dan.
Hey guys, so 16, 17, I was doing economics, maths and physics at A-level. Similar to Lau, I really enjoyed economics and sort of want to pursue it at university. So I applied to uni and decided to take a year out. So I actually worked at Dulwich, Singapore for 6 months, where I sort of taught sports, and then did the whole gap year thing where I traveled around Asia for sort of 2-3 months after that. If any of you are sort of considering gap year, I know sort of COVID may or may not sort of play a role in that, but definitely sort of consider it. It was probably one of the best years of my life when I sort of did it. And then after I did the gap year, I went to Bristol and did economics. And then had a sort of another gap year, which was slightly less voluntary than the first one due to COVID. But I managed to essentially secure a grad role in accounting, which is what I'm doing at the moment. So I'm currently trained to be an accountant. It takes about 3 years. It takes sort of around 15 exams as well. So I've been there about a year, so sort of got 2 more to go. And yeah, that's kind of where I'm at the moment.
Brilliant, thank you, Dan. And finally to Adam, same question.
Thanks very much for having me, James. So similar to Dan, I left Dulwich, I think probably a year after, probably around 2017. I studied at A-level economics, French and maths. And then again, similar to Dan, I took a year out, and I'd also definitely recommend taking a year out. And I think sort of what we're going to come on to probably a bit later is actually really thinking about what's coming next and not rushing decisions or making decisions for sort of any other reason than you wanted to do that. I went to Newcastle University to do the PwC Flying Start degree. And essentially that is a combination of a business accounting and finance degree integrated with the 15 ACA exams, and then also going on placement in your 2nd, 3rd and 4th year to get your professional days. So it's a 4-year course, but hopefully if you go through the 4 years, you finish the 5-year ACA qualification. So yeah, I'm currently on my summer break, but I'm in audit, and yeah, that's a bit about me.
Super. Okay, so that should hopefully give everyone a sense of who the panelists are and sort of what their experiences have been. So I want to start with a couple of big questions. And I guess one thing which Helen touched upon in the talk this morning was, COVID has really completely changed the economy for all of us. It's changed financial markets, but it's changed the world society as we know it. So one question, and this is to everyone on the panel, is if you were 16 or 17 today and there was a global pandemic and you're living this current situation, do you think it would have changed the way you would be looking at your career, or do you think it should do? And if so, why? And I might go to Helen first, just because you sort of touched on that earlier. So over to you, Helen.
Yeah, this is a new world that will be here forever. So what you need to think about, what I would suggest is how I am talking to you now. How are you presenting yourself virtually? In fact, the best investment you could make is if you know someone who could help you set up some lights, nice background, and all the rest of it. And you might think, what? But honestly, particularly the way the world is going, a lot of your interviews are going to continue to be virtual. A lot of your training will be, maybe even a lot of your university study. This is the way the world is. This is not just some short-term change. And to be honest with you, I mean, I've been actually had this set up about a few months before it all began, but I mean, we've been doing it for 18 months now. So we really need to get into that. So I think it wouldn't change what I wanted to do, which was to be in the thick of things, be right where everything was happening and change was happening and where a lot of news and money and all the rest of it was sort of hitting the headlines. I wanted to be in the midst of things, but I think it's just the way that you present yourself and how that world is going to work that's different, and that's how you can best equip yourselves. You know, and it's funny actually, because I'm sure in 10 years' time, we're going to look back on Zoom the way that my generation looks back on the fax machine, which hopefully most of you won't even know what that is.
Thanks, Alan. And I'm sure sort of allows thinking there in terms of behavioural economics, to the presentation side is something which obviously is very important in how we're perceived, but maybe isn't the sort of obvious thing we think about. Thanks, Alan. So maybe going to Dan then, so you talked about the gap year you took and how maybe it's more difficult now. In just putting a thought out there, do you think it would change your sort of opinion on what you'd be looking to do when you left school if you were in the sort of current situation?
So I think if you'd asked me a year ago, I would have 100% said take a gap year. I think the final year of uni, the first year of uni is one of the most important ones. And, just from what we've heard in sort of the news, and also know a few people still at uni still, they were basically cooped up inside. Your social side is sort of gone, and you're just on webinars the whole time or on lectures. So I would have 100% said this time last year, take a year out. And then hopefully, come September, things would have changed. I think now we have a slightly better idea of what's going to sort of happen August, September time, October, really, when university starts. And I think over the next few years, it's just going to improve. I think with the gap year in terms of travel, that's a bit more complicated, particularly where, most people do tend to travel either Asia or South America or even sort of Europe. It's still a bit shaky at the moment. But I was sort of, it's sort of hard to say because these things you do need to plan. But at the same time, I wouldn't say completely write off a gap year just because, the travel may be sort of slightly restricted. You can obviously still have a fantastic year working here and then traveling for a few months when things are a bit more clear. So, I wouldn't say write off a gap year at all. You just need to, I think, probably have a bit more thought and consideration into it, just to sort of try and work out exactly what is sort of available when you do want to take it. But if you guys are 16, 17, that's still sort of 2 years off, so you've got a lot of time to kind of work out what is available and what you actually want to do during that year.
Perfect, thank you, Dan. I just wonder, Lorenzo, from a university sort of perspective, what sort of changes have you seen, and do you think it should be affecting the way our attendees are looking at their futures?
Thank you for your question. Now, it's difficult for me to say, firstly, because when I was 16 or 17, I was pretty much, guessing things like a weather vane. So I'm not the best person to give advice, but also because history has been very, very dynamic. Even prior to COVID, we had the emergence of Asian economies, the aging population in Europe, climate change. All these things have effects, and it's difficult to single out which ones should be ascribed to COVID. My guess as an economist is that this lockdown has piled up debt, and therefore we are heading towards an era of inflation, which means that our salaries might be eaten away by the high temperature at which prices will be rising. What could I advise to somebody? What would I tell to my daughter if she were to go out now? She isn't, she's only 8, but if she were to, I would tell her to invest with desperate urgency in her intellectual flexibility, to study, not to get the one and only job that we will have in life, because I fear that will not be the case, but to study in order to get that intellectual agility, which will enable us to be productive workers, to grow as workers, and from a purely money perspective, to beat inflation, to be always one step ahead of raising prices. Yes, prices are rising, but I am so productive that I've increased my salary. That would be my advice, if I may.
Brilliant, thank you very much, very clear. Okay, I want to move on to a slightly different topic now, but just before I do, just to recap to the students watching, we've got a Slido poll open now, which gives you a few topics to rank in terms of where you want me to take the conversation. So it could be jobs of the future and the skills we might need in the future, as Lorenzo's sort of talked about. Maybe you're more interested in particular detail on university applications. Do have a look on your phones and rank what you'd be most interested in hearing about. But before we go on to that, I really want to talk a bit about diversity in economics and how we sort of improve the diversity of the people studying and sort of in leading roles in the fields and in the profession. I'm going to go to Helen first, but also to Lau and Lorenzo about what your organisations are doing. Now, Helen, we've talked about the gender imbalance before today. I think the stat which sort of doesn't surprise me, but I think is quite shocking, is about the number of boys and girls that study A-level economics. I think it's something like 1 in 6 boys doing A-level do economics, 1 in 17 girls do it, which is an incredible gulf. Now, clearly, that's not ideal. If economics is too important to be left to half the population, I think we can all agree on that. So my question, and it's not just about gender, but just more generally, is what can we do to achieve greater diversity? And for Helen, then Lau, then Lorenzo, what are your organizations doing in particular to get more underrepresented groups into those top positions and the junior ones as well? Helen first, please.
Well, yeah, this is, it's just incredibly important topic and something I've always been very passionate about. And it's precisely why I'm doing an event like today. And I do many of these, and I try and offer mentoring help to as diverse a group of people as possible. As you said, it's not just about gender. I think that schools are we really have to start it there, because I take a lot of interns out of universities, and it appears that already, even at 21 years old, after 3 years, some things have really set in about, what people think an economist looks like, what an economist does, which is a real shame. So I think we need to attack that. Something that I'm doing, obviously, with my own organization is, we take lots of interns. We do, yes, try and keep them as diverse as possible. Although I will hold my hands up and say that when 4 years ago, I took my very first intern, super excited. She was a girl. She was studying law. I thought, brilliant, this is great. Until my chief operating officer looked at her CV and went, girl, went to a girls' independent school, at Oxford, at Christchurch, which is where you studied, you've hired yourself. And I then realized, oh my God, we all have these unconscious biases that we need to deal with. And that is a real kick that we all have to address, not just as employers, but in our lives. So I look, I mean, I'm astonished. Like, I just think it's fascinating and always have. I just hope more people can kind of pick up on that, and more diverse kinds of people will see that.
Brilliant, thanks so much, Helen. Lau, I just wonder if you want to pick up on that unconscious bias sort of point, and perhaps what's the BIT looking at in that sort of space to try and improve diversity?
Yeah, we actually look at it from kind of multiple angles. So one is that we have a whole diversity team, which is looking at how we can apply behavioral insights to these kinds of issues. We also think about it a lot internally, and we actually developed, it's now kind of spun out from our team. It's an organization, it's all right, called Applied, which is to try and de-bias recruitment. And it does the thing of, we don't look at CVs until someone has made it to interview. So we assess on questions, we chunk responses to those questions, and we have multiple reviewers to try and take some of that stuff out. So we've done a lot of work on that. We definitely still have issues around diversity. We try to reach out to different groups, like Black Economists Network and others, but there are definitely some elements of diversity where we do quite well. More women than men work at the Behavioral Insights team, but there are other areas where our diversity could definitely be improved, and we're looking to do that.
Thanks, Lau. And then finally to Lorenzo then, so in the university sector, what sort of, could you maybe talk us through some of the initiatives in that sort of space?
Yes, thank you for your question. So I think that all scientists, but economists even more so, are keenly aware of the importance of diversity. We shouldn't forget that etymologically the word economics, from the Greek oikos, home, means the way in which we organize our home. And our home is not just these four walls. Our home is the society, the world. And if there is no diversity, if you get only one perspective, I very much doubt that you can organize your society and your world in a particularly good way. So we are keenly aware of that. The Institute for Fiscal Studies wrote a report which has some unpleasant figures like the one you were citing about A levels, but also some good figures. Over the past decades in the UK, universities have increased their share of colleagues who teach economics and who do research in economics. I think that it would be offensive to say that we have solved the problem. We are trying to solve it. We are working. The University of Nottingham, like many other good institutions, of course, is keenly aware on the problem. and we have an equality, diversity, and inclusion strategy. What does it try to deliver? Well, if charity starts at home, we would like to ensure, and we are working in order to ensure, equality of experience to the students, more diversity in our hiring. So I am part of the hiring in my school, and I really enjoy to see how diversity is now a huge centerpiece in our discussions. Going forward, universities are machines to educate people. And I think that it is important that we also educate people into thinking out of the box, which I think is one of the beauties of diversity, and in understanding that in all sciences and in all disciplines, getting different perspectives, which you must get from people with a different background because they don't come from out of the blue, is something that we want to do. We really hope that we will be able to send in the society people with this education and frame of mind, and we are working towards it.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. Okay, so I'm just looking at the slido.com poll, and I'm sort of looking at the rankings, and it looks like where the audience want me to take this is essentially tips. So how do we best apply to university? How do we maximize chance of getting jobs? How do we make those decisions, which are so difficult, which I think Lau alluded to in his sort of elevator pitch at the start. So let me start with the university, the sort of initial, or that first move post school, which may not be university for everyone. What I'm going to do first of all is go to Dan and ask you about studying economics at degree versus A level. Can you just talk us through a little bit? You know, is it very similar? Is it different? What were the challenges? What were your thoughts on that?
So I'm probably not a very good example of this because I didn't look into the course that I was going to study into sort of a lot of detail, and it worked out for me. But I was sort of quite shocked by the difference between A level and sort of degree economics. So A level is, from what I remember anyway, it's quite wordy. You do some graphs, but the math side is maybe some sort of percentages, maybe the odd formula, but that's kind of it. It's very much sort of essay based. University, on the other hand, I think on the whole, obviously courses differ, particularly in the UK, but I would say around 70 to 80% are very mathematical. If you look into them, they are BScs, they're not BAs, and that's because a lot of your course is essentially statistics based. Speaking from sort of personal experience at Bristol, around half my course was sort of economicsy and sort of essay, sort of similar to sort of A level. But within those essays, there's a lot of maths, and you're sort of talking about certain formulas. And then half of it is essentially pure statistics. There's a subject called econometrics, which is essentially applied statistics for economics. And regardless of where you go, you will be doing econometrics. So when you're applying, do look into the courses. You can look at the breakdown, you can look at what each course does year by year, what to expect. So you could be doing something like Lau, where it's sort of more behavioral economics. You could be doing sort of more statistics based. So really look into that. But then that said, if maths isn't your sort of strongest point, there are BAs, there are economics BAs, I believe, maybe Exeter, maybe wrong, don't quote me on that. But there are certainly a few sort of economics courses where it's sort of less maths orientated, but you're still sort of studying economics. So yeah, I would say, so that's the key difference really, the amount of maths involved. That's basically the reason why all these economics courses demand maths A level, either B, A, or A star. It's because it is so mathsy, and they know that people who haven't got a maths A level will be struggling on that. So I think essentially really look into that before you sort of make a decision on what economics course you go for.
Brilliant. That's a great answer, Dan. Thank you ever so much for that. And then just moving to Adam, who is obviously taking a slightly different route with the Flying Start program. I mean, could you maybe talk us through how you found that, what you think the benefits of having that approach might be, just a bit more detail about what that would look like as an option?
Yes, definitely. So when I was in my last year of school, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I was really interested in entrepreneurship, and that's the only sort of area that really excited me. Now, when you're having conversations about what other students and your friends are doing and what people are planning on, it can be quite demoralizing when you don't have your own plan and you're not, I don't know, from the age of 10 wanting to be a medic, for example. And that's not necessarily a bad thing. However, it does require action, and it means that you just maybe got to work a little bit harder to realize what your interests are. And my biggest piece of advice would be is to have as many conversations with as many different people from as many different backgrounds as possible. And people love talking about their career. They love talking about what they've done. And it's about really trying to pick people's brains about what they would advise if they had another go at it. And because in retrospect, lots of people have some really, really good useful advice. So in my last year at Dulwich, there was a former OA, Richard Apthorpe, who came in and gave a talk. He'd made the effort to come down from Newcastle, speak at Dulwich, and there was about 5 other people in the room. Now, I think he was expecting there to be about 30 students, but these are the opportunities that you have to capitalize on. I really didn't want to go to the talk. I wanted to go and hang out with my mates at lunchtime, but I went along, and it was how I got to where I am now. And the other point about that is sort of, and it's what Helen touched on earlier, is as soon as you spark that conversation with someone, you're building your network. And having a network, and sort of whether it be taking someone's email down to taking someone's LinkedIn, people will want to help if you show that initial effort, that initial enthusiasm. So anyway, that's how I ended up going to Newcastle. I wasn't particularly interested in any further study, but that's something that changed, because before my year out, I thought I love maths and I love French. I'll do maths and French somewhere. After my year out, I realized that, well, actually, no, I don't love them. They were my favorite subjects, but I'll go and do the ACA, and sort of, as Lorenzo touched on, about do study that opens doors. And I was told by so many people that people whose opinion I respected, that the ACA, it will open doors. It's sort of just it's a postgraduate qualification. So I thought I'll try and give that a go, and then build from there. But yeah, definitely would just recommend speak to as many people as you can about what's coming next.
Brilliant, thanks so much. I mean, yeah, from my perspective as well, I completely echo that. It's just about getting that information. It's so difficult, but the more information you can get, the better decision you hope to be able to make. Let me turn to Lorenzo, and just from the sort of university's perspective, let's imagine someone's applying for a degree in your school. What is it you're looking for in an application, in a personal statement? What is it that makes a student stand out to you?
Our application policy is flexible, but irrespective, we tend to look for relatively prescriptive things, such as A levels and stuff like that, which can be measured. The points which I would like to make, which are less measurable, are 2. Firstly, we can tell you how you get admitted through quantitative information like A level and similar, but it becomes your decision whether you think that a degree in economics or in mathematics or in, I don't know, Syriac literature is good for you. And that is something which needs to be clear to you. We, through the personal statement, will try, of course, to ascertain whether you do want to study the subject, you are genuinely committed or not, but ultimately it comes from you. My second point is that you also need to have an element of self-assessment, because yes, economics is a science. My colleagues who are based in the US say that the E in STEM now stands for economics. Let's say that there should be an extra E in STEAM maybe, but still. And therefore there is a mathematics component. Every good university will try to cater for your level of mathematics, putting you on different speeds and getting you up to the same speeds. Nevertheless, you need to ask yourselves, if this is a scientific subject, what's the language that is spoken? And the language that is spoken is formulas. Sadly, that's what it is. But I really insist, we as a university will tell you, look into yourself and ask yourself, is this subject something that is good for you?
Brilliant, thank you very much. Yeah, it's having that passion, that understanding about the subject is what you're looking for. Now, that sort of builds on to a question here from James, which is how practical versus theoretical are economics degrees? And possibly we could even go a bit further than that and say, is it a good thing that you need to have such a focus on maths? I mean, there's been the course of the program of new textbooks which try to challenge that a little bit. I mean, this is more of an open question. Maybe let's go to Lorenzo first, given where you are, but what are your thoughts on that practical versus theoretical sort of viewpoint?
A typical, perhaps trite answer is that a degree is something that is as practical or theoretical as you want it to be. Normally, schools and faculties are huge. There are plenty of colleagues, so there are plenty of modules that you can select, and you can tailor your degree around you. My very personal opinion, my 2 pence for what they're worth, is that a BSc in a subject, in a scientific subject, typically should have a strong theoretical component, not theory for the sake of theory, nobody is asking you that, but theory in order to, so to speak, give you the skills in order to acquire a more practical specialization later on. So the fact that economics contains maths is also the nature of the subject, of course. In itself, it's not an absolute tragedy because, yes, of course, business is a far more practical subject. But I saw a lot of students who did their MSc when I was at the business school, who had done a degree in economics. The ease with which they picked the subject and the depth with which they could pick it was something which students from other backgrounds did not always achieve. So it's food for thought, I think.
No, brilliant. Helen, you did PPE. What I mean, was it fairly theoretical when you were studying it? And what were your thoughts? Were you sort of annoyed by that at all?
I was smiling as soon as I saw that question, because I remember distinctly that we did a lot of theoretical economics in the first year. I was excited to move into the second year. I thought, great, we're going to do something more applied now, which was basically theory all over again with a couple of examples. So I did have to say, I mean, look, this was 20 years ago. I'm sure the course may well have changed, but I think Oxford University probably does have a fairly traditional approach to it. I think that I think it was Dan that was saying about, yes, you have to kind of look into the detail of the course that you're looking at. But I would also echo Lorenzo's point there that you can, either by your choice of papers or the way that you study, make it a bit more practical and applied. So, don't be put off here that we are saying a lot of it is theoretical. There's usually an opportunity to stretch a bit more if you want to in the direction of things that are more applied.
Brilliant, thank you very much. Lau, I think a lot of people listening, I mean, I think behavioral economics is one of the favorite topics for A-level students nowadays. Can you specialize in that at undergrad level? I mean, how did you get into the sort of that specialism? Can you just talk us through that maybe?
Yeah, sure. So I think I was always interested in the behavioral economics side of things from A-level, reading books like Nudge and Tim Harford's books and that kind of thing. And yeah, I'd echo the earlier comments, like the first couple years of my degree, quite theoretical, but then in third year, I got to pick a behavioral economics module for my undergrad. And then when I went and did my master's, I was able to choose to study. I could have done straight economics. Instead, I chose to study economics and public policy. And then there were these more applied public policy analysis modules, and it was kind of a bit more practical and kind of leading me towards a job like the one I did, working for the Government Economic Service, and then also the kind of work I do now. So I imagine this is like 11 years ago. So I imagine there are probably now more behavioral economics modules at universities, and there's more of that kind of thing going on. It was kind of still in the early days back when I was studying.
Brilliant, thanks very much. And just picking up, so we might move on to the sort of jobs areas shortly, but just one question, just bouncing back to you, Helen, on PPE. I mean, overall, did you enjoy it? We've got some students who are in the audience who they're not sure, do they want to do 3 different subjects, the mixture of it? If they're particularly keen economists, would you encourage PPE? What are your thoughts overall on PPE as a degree?
I absolutely loved it. It was brilliant. I loved it because it was new. I'd actually never studied any of those topics before, so I loved that challenge. I loved that it was broad. It's quite hard sometimes in the UK to do something a bit more multidisciplinary, so you can go, and then of course you can see the linkages. And I mean, look, I mean, I'm just talking about the PPE course at Oxford. I mean, there is quite a degree of potential specialization. So you get 8 papers in your final 2 years. I think it's 5 or possibly even 6 that you could tweak towards being economics, and you can do econometrics, you could do sociology. I mean, you can really go into many different aspects of social science. I think I partly liked it as well because I didn't know till I got there what I liked. Really, you kind of go in thinking, oh yeah, I'll be a politics person, and then you're like, God, I love philosophy. It's really interesting. I mean, I loved it. I was terrible at it. My worst papers in finals, but I loved the chance to do that breadth and the opportunity to specialize where I wanted to. So yeah, I mean, I'm a huge fan.
Superb, brilliant. And just to echo to the audience, please do keep your questions coming in. They're fantastic. Right, so looking at the rankings, I think we want to do a bit of time on applying for jobs in general, thinking about career decisions more broadly. So I might go to Dan first, actually, because you mentioned trying to get your first job during the pandemic, and I guess for a lot of people right now, the labour market is tough. Could you just talk us through how that process was for you between graduation and getting your first job?
Sure. I mean, the process itself it's tricky. It's hard because you have thousands and thousands of graduates graduating every year. Majority, so say you're going for an accounting job like I did, majority of people going for an accounting job are on paper the same. They've all got at least a 2-1 or a first from a reputable university. They've all done pretty well in their A levels, and they've all done probably something co-curricular in uni. So it's how do you really stand out from the crowd? So that's sort of a tricky area. And that's kind of linked to applying to uni as well. All these sixth formers and people doing A levels, etc., applying to the same unis. They on paper look relatively the same. How do you try and stand out? So that's one thing that no one really warns you about when you're applying for grad roles. So I think sort of the one thing to really do, I think particularly now when you're at Dulwich, but then also in university, is to do things outside of your degree. It gives you things to really talk about. So less so with personal statements, because interviews don't really sort of happen for economics degrees. But for your job interviews, it gives you something to talk about. So I helped run the Economics Society in Bristol. And I had to sort of I was the sponsorship secretary, so I had to essentially help raise money for the society. And that gives you something to talk about. It gives you something to write in your application. And it sort of makes you stand out sort of from the other candidates. So from that regard, it's sort of really building. Everyone always says it, and it is cliche, but it's stuff outside of your main degree or your sort of A levels that are co-curricular to try and kind of stand out. And secondly, it's just for, I think, jobs, apply for as many as possible. I mean, you could just go for 5 or 6, but you've got to understand that for each grad job, for particularly finance, if you're going down that route, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of candidates for maybe 5 positions. So you do have to apply to a good number of jobs in order to sort of really get better at the process as well, get better at interviewing, but also just don't limit it to just maybe one industry or one company. Sort of do a wide breadth of applications.
Superb, thank you, Dan. Just on that, so thinking about applying for jobs at the moment, and has anyone applied for a job in the new sort of Zoom, the new age of doing? So Dan's nodding along. So I don't know, want to talk about that, sort of your experience of that sort of process on Zoom?
Yeah, I think I actually had a really difficult experience applying online, and I think what Helen touched on earlier was completely correct in sort of how you present yourself. I was applying for a summer intern at a bank, and it was my final interview, and my interview didn't have their camera on because the camera wasn't working. That doesn't sound like much of a challenge, but when you can't see who you're speaking to, and I almost wanted, well, I did actually ask for another go, but I was rejected. But my point is that I definitely think things are changing. I think the more that you can get used to being on a camera and even recording yourself, and I'll definitely watch this recording back again and see how I came across, because actually it is a really difficult thing to present yourself over Zoom. And so I don't know, that's been my experience. Mine wasn't very negative, but if you can try and turn your negatives into a positive, if you can be confident online, then you're going to have a much better chance of doing well.
Nervously thinking about myself touching my face on camera and what I'm doing at the moment. So thanks for that, Adam. Lau, maybe thinking about the sort of behavioural side of this. I mean, any sort of, I know you obviously work on education. I guess some of your work will be looking at, that, as you said in your talk, about that progression from school to uni, but just in general, I mean, could we apply the East framework or some sort of behavioural thinking about how to really stand out and be successful in applications? And any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I can maybe speak a little bit about what I like, what stands out to me when I'm interviewing people. So we get a lot of fantastic people applying to work at the moment. Insights team is often very oversubscribed, and I think, as has been touched on, by others, like interest and passion, like really shine through. And if you can convey that, you know, not only do you have the qualifications, like you've got the interest, and like you really want this job, and you really want this job that I've advertised specifically. Now, as Dan has mentioned, yeah, that may well not be true. You may well be applying to like more than one job, but you need to try and make me feel like you really want to work in my team. And then I'm going to feel more positively towards you. Another tip, which I think really stands out to me, is if you are asking the person interviewing you a question, if you ask me like a brilliant question, I will be much more impressed. And there's usually a moment at the end of the interview where they say, "Oh, have you got any questions for us?" I think some people, you've been nervous during the interview. I think I've done that myself, and you're like, "Oh no, like we're done. Fuck, I'm just glad to get out of here." But that's really a great opportunity to ask an interesting question and stand out a little bit. Someone asked a question about process evaluations and us looking at the why of something working this morning, and that was a great question. And that's the kind of question where I'm like, oh, like that person has stood out to me a bit.
Awesome, thanks so much, Lau. Helen, I'm just thinking, you're CEO of your own company. I think I'm right in saying you founded it. Now, there will be people out in the audience who want to run their own business in the future. I'm sure maybe they want to be self-employed, and possibly they don't want to go for the university route at all. And I'm just wondering, you know, it takes a special sort of person to establish your own company. If there's someone out in the audience who's ambitious to do that, what sort of advice would you give them in terms of how they get ready for that step?
It certainly is a big jump, and it took me the best part of 20 years to do it. So, you know, I do fully understand it can be hard. But of course, just starting out in your career, you know, post school can also be a kind of good time to do it. You're not sort of dragged down, hopefully, with mortgages and kids and all the rest of it. So you're slightly freer, because look, the truth is there is a practical angle to starting your own business, because you know, what I always say to everybody is, yes, of course, you've got to be passionate about your product and your idea. And of course, you're not even going to think about doing it unless you've got that idea and that plan and that vision, right? And you do need a bit of monomaniacal passion about that thing. But you've got to have the practical side of it, because if money or lifestyle or whatever it weighs you down, it's just going to be too hard to pursue that passion. So, you know, I do say follow your dreams, but my mother was from the north of England and very down to earth. I was born in Blackpool, and she said, you know, come on, don't go off on too much of a flight of fancy. Keep your feet on the ground. Can you actually do it? So you got to be practical with yourself. You know, there's no denying I took a huge drop in salary. Well, I didn't have a salary after coming out of a bank, or actually it was a fund manager where I worked, you know, and I didn't pay myself anything for the first year. So you've got to know, how am I going to do that? How am I going to live that life? So I think there's that balance of, you know, the pragmatism and the dream, and you kind of have to keep the two going. And it's bloody difficult. And I think you've got to know if you're the sort of person that can deal with that kind of stress. It's better because you get a lot of freedom and no one's telling you what to do. But you know what, I have to get up every morning and I have to tell me what to do. You know, I was filling in a VAT return in between the stuff we did this morning. So it's wonderful, and I totally advocate for it, but it's not without some of its stresses, and I just think you have to be practical.
Brilliant. We're getting close to the end of the session, so what I think I might do is just ask everyone just to think about, if you give one bit of advice to somebody in the audience, 17 years old, interested in economics potentially, what advice would you have wanted to hear in their shoes? So I'll start with Lorenzo, and I'll sort of work around the panel. So Lorenzo first, one bit of advice.
Well, I mean, if I would have loved if when I was 19, somebody had told me, make sure that what you're studying is really what you want, and that you know what you're studying, and that you even know the details, because sometimes, I mean, with the stress from A levels and am I making the right choice and so on, we don't look at the details. We do not make a choice which is 100% informed, and there is a price to pay. The price may not be steep, but there is still a price to pay.
Brilliant, thanks ever so much. Adam, over to you. One bit of advice you would give.
I think just to try and enjoy every single step of the way. Definitely when I was 17, I went through a period when I started thinking about banks, and I started associating myself with internships and thinking that this really makes a difference to my character, my personality, what my friends think about me, what my family thinks about me. But actually, life's too short to even start thinking about these things in that sort of way. Just really try and enjoy it. Try and be, like everyone said, I think that one of the main messages is be passionate. Try and find a passion, and then you enjoy things. But definitely just try and enjoy every step of the way, and don't wish away time. Don't wish away time to get your results, because it's really not the way you want to do it. That's what I would think retrospectively.
Brilliant. We're going to be really quick now. So Lau, Dan and Helen, you've only got maybe 20 seconds each. So Lau, I'll probably rush you, but go for it. Your bit of advice.
I'd say maybe keep it broad. I'm jealous of the US system of degrees.
Dan?
I'd say so don't rush into the degree, do your research, and also with the gap year thing, don't rush. Don't feel like you need to rush into uni. Take your time, take a year out if you feel like you want to or need to. Yeah.
Brilliant. And Helen, final word to you.
What is the one thing I can do today to move myself forward? And don't worry about anything else.
Awesome. Guys, thank you ever so much, all of you, for your time today. It's been really interesting to listen to you. Thanks everyone who's watching online. We're back at 3 o'clock for our final session with Diane Coyle. Thanks again to all the panelists. Take care. Bye.